Is approval of today's agenda.
Move approval.
With addition?
With the addition.
Yeah, we have an addition.
Second.
We have a motion to approve the agenda with the addition and a second. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Citizens to be heard. Any citizens who would like to be heard on any item that is not on today's agenda? Seeing none, approval of payment of bills and vouchers.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second to pay the bills. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public hearing. Proposal for county to issue revenue bonds to finance Eventide Morehead Senior Living Project.
Move to open. Do we have to wait till 8:35?
I think you do.
Okay, well, we'll hold off on that for 5 minutes, so let's see.
Why don't you take number 4? Oh, no, that's just not here.
Why don't we do,
The agenda.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners. As we discussed last week at board, we recently conducted some interviews for Planning and Zoning Director. We had a number of qualified candidates for the position. Through the interview process, one candidate stood out, and the request that we have before you for appointment this morning is to appoint Matthew Jacobson as our new Planning and Zoning Director. He comes with us a geography degree, a bachelor's at the University of Minnesota, a master's degree of University of Missouri. He's had some experience as a mapping and planning specialist of Upper Mississippi River Basin, and most recently has worked at Houston Engineering, and has worked with some of our commissioners on the One Watershed, One Plan. And so if approved, he would be looking at starting on May 28th. And so with that, I would open it up for your questions.
any questions for Steve on this?
Well, I was in on part of the interview, and Mr. Jacobson displayed a lot of qualities that we're looking for. Well, Jenny and I have been working with him in the One Watershed, One Plan, and I think he's presented himself well, and I think he's a knowledgeable person, and I make a recommendation that we approve the appointment.
I'll second the
We have
motion.
a motion and a second to approve Matthew Jacobson. When will he be starting, Steve?
May 28th.
May 20th, okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we got a couple minutes. Jenny, you want to do your
Sure.
committee report?
Last week I attended the Cass Clay Food Systems Advisory meeting. There was a presentation in regards to single-use, the single-use food, plastics, the forks and cups and whatnot. We had a presentation from Essentia on steps that they've taken to reduce the amount of those items going into the landfill, and just talked more on the food system side about how we could either from the beginning permitting stages, talk to companies about how to reduce that, and also talked a little bit about the single-use plastic bag initiative and conversations that our county has been a part of. And I recommended that while those recycling areas are present, the knowledge is not, and so how do we let people know that those plastic bag recycling bins are present? That's something Commissioner Campbell has talked a lot about. I attended the Soil and Water Conservation District meeting last week as well. Talked a lot about there's a lot of urban conservation issues that they're dealing with right now. They've had good presentations for the workshops and making rain barrels. I think they said that they've got 3 or 4 on tap, and they've had lots of interest there. Talked about the pollinator patio party that they had at Junkyard. They will be doing another collaboration with Legends, the Bar and Grill in South Moorhead, to do another fundraiser for the Crestwood pollinator piece. And just they continue to be very active in lots of different, One Watershed, One Plan, different meetings. We also talked a lot about the the gravel, the gravel piece, and how
Certified
do we certify
weed-free.
weed-free gravel for North Dakota standards when we're Minnesota standards, and the Cass County guy doesn't want to come to Clay County, and companies are needing certified weed-free gravel, so we're kind of, I don't want to say at a stalemate in terms of what we can do there, but the Soil and Water Board remained steadfast that they are fine with the Clay County Ag Inspector going out to pits, certifying it to Minnesota standards, and if companies need North Dakota standards, they're gonna have to reach out to Cass County. And I know we have a ag producer here, or a gravel producer here, but I mean, we can't, the list is different, so we're in a weird spot. I don't know, if you have followed up on anything?
No, that's, you've recapped it very well. We are kind of at a stalemate as far as the two counties. I do want to be clear, one of the comments that was made, that this board had indicated at one point that the Cass County inspector was not allowed to come across that. And has that ever come from this board that anybody recalls? I've not been able to find anything.
I thought
Not since I've been on it.
that's what the Soil and Water had thought was relayed to them, that there was some motion in Cass County, and so I had just in question asked if that was the case for you to check with Cass County, so no, I didn't apply.
I don't recall it ever coming before this board to deny them access.
No, not since
No,
I've
I
been
mean,
Okay.
Open season.
the reality is if for a Cass County project, if they need to have it for Cass County, if it's their regulations, they should do whatever they need to do that.
Agreed.
The other thing that we talked about is this board's action to have the Soil and Water follow up on the invasive species dollars that we get from the state allotment, and so there was conversation about how they could best put that money to use, and they all felt, as we did, that it was a good opportunity for increased presence from the Soil and Water in the community, but also had identified several either river or lake accesses where there wasn't much informational signage, so they'll go forward on that. And kind of caught me off guard, so I think that's all my reports for right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll go back to the public hearing.
Move to open.
Second.
We have a motion, second, to open the public hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Okay. So we have a proposal to issue revenue bonds to finance the Eventide Moorhead Senior Living Project. James Stewart and Arnston Stewart, Wagner PC. Come on up, gentlemen. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, my name is Jim Stewart. I'm an attorney with Arnston Stewart and Wagner. I'm acting as bond counsel in connection with Eventide financing. So we appeared at your April 16th meeting and asked this board to give preliminary approval to the issuance of $8 million in bonds under the Industrial Development Act. The proceeds would be used to finance a portion of the construction of an addition to the Linden Tree facility and to do some renovations there. So at that meeting, you gave preliminary approval subject to a public hearing, which was scheduled for this morning. At the conclusion of the public hearing, we have another resolution for your consideration that would approve the issuance of the bonds. If you have questions regarding the project, Darren Owes, the CFO for Eventide, knows all about the project.
Questions?
What was the total project cost again?
18 million, yeah.
Were you able to find another entity to help with?
We're still looking for
Okay.
that, yeah.
Any other questions for these gentlemen? Anyone else who would like to be heard in the public hearing?
So, right now, if we issue these bonds, the project will be a go then? Are you?
Yeah, I think we're
Are you
planning to
anticipating
start.
needing to have another entity provide the other?
Yeah, we'll need that, but
Okay.
we're still working on that at this time, and
So I guess what happens, what would happen if you can't find that? Then where does the project sit, and what happens with these bonds? I guess that's my,
Well, a couple of different options, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner. So one option is that they could come back to Clay County in 2020
get the 10.
and ask this board to issue additional bonds, because each year you have a $10 million bank qualified limit.
Right.
So depending on what projects Clay County has scheduled, I mean, one option is that, the 8 million would handle construction through the end of the year, and we'd come back and ask for another financing next year. The other option is just to find another small issuer that has bank qualified capacity. And we've talked to some other towns, and they're not sure right now what their plans are for the summer. So they said they would be willing to do something later in the year. So we may end up waiting until maybe this fall and then doing another financing through one of those issuers.
Does this limit how many bonds we can issue then?
Yeah.
It technically doesn't, it doesn't limit how much you can issue, but it limits whether or not you can designate them as bank qualified. So Clay County approved of financing previously at the April 16th meeting.
Yeah.
And then, so together with those bonds and these bonds, you're pretty close to your $10 million limit.
The bank qualified just allows,
It's,
local, I think you can get more local banks that can be involved, and I think it tends to bring in a better rate.
right.
right, if banks are purchasing your bonds, it's an advantage to them. If you're selling your bonds to individual investors, it doesn't make any difference. But if banks are interested in buying your bonds, then they prefer to have that designation, because it gives them it lowers their carrying cost on the bond, so it basically improves their yield.
Yeah, I guess, I support the, your request here. I don't want to go so far as to say that 10 million would be available in 2020 either,
Right.
because we do have other things that go on that we always need to review, whether it might even be something that the county wants to do, and that could be 10 million or less, that we might
Right.
want to have access to
Yeah.
those.
Anything else? Any other questions? Anyone else who would like to be heard on this issue on the public hearing? Jenny?
Well, I think that Eventide has been a great partner with the community. I think it's definitely something that I'm proud to have in both Moorhead and Fargo and Clay County. And so I think that, my hope is that with this action and your construction throughout the season, that maybe additional entities will come on board to see that it is kind of the whole vision for what it does for the metro, really. And so hopefully that will happen, but in the meantime, I'm happy that you're building in Clay County, so thank you.
I agree.
Okay, anyone else who would like to be heard?
Move to close hearing.
Second.
Motion and a second to close the hearing. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. What are the board's wishes on
Mr.
this?
Chair, I would move bond resolution 2019-23.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion?
I guess I'm just glad that they're expanding in Moorhead, and any additions that we can have to Moorhead or anything in Clay County is going to be good for us, so thank you for doing that. So
I drive Bay Street South and I see you're ready to go.
Yeah.
I see the fences up and,
Little soil
Yeah.
remediation work that's
Yeah.
being done here
Okay.
for the
Good.
first few weeks.
I think all of us are very excited to see you building in Moorhead, so.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or issues? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. There you go, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Sheriff and Chief. Morning.
Commissioner, Chair. How are you? Good. So we're here this morning, we'd like to begin fundraising for a second canine within the sheriff's office. We currently have one canine, it's Canine Deacon. He's about 4 or 5 years old. He's very good, very capable at the job. We had a great handler for Canine Deacon, but it would be nice to add an additional canine to the department. The history of the sheriff's office canine unit is started about 94 to 2012. Started with one canine and then they had an additional as well, so they had a total of 2. It was nice to have 2 canines at the time. They could work opposite shifts. You'd always have that coverage on the street. They're a very valuable tool that we have. For a while, our canine program was disbanded. We didn't have one. We now have it back with Canine Deacon. And it would be nice to be able to do this now to where in 4 or 5 years when Deacon is looking to retire, we'll still have a dog on the street and we can start working again to have another dog and always have 2 canines working. They're valuable tools not only to find bad guys, but they're also valuable for the PR side of it too. We get a lot of requests for demonstrations, for people to see the dog. We also get a lot of requests for the dogs to show up at locations to do other types of sniffs and things like that to ensure there's no illegal drugs in these areas. And some of the places we do go to our schools.
Not to question it with you, how many, you say you get a lot of requests, you know, is there any, what is that? 2 a week, 2 a month, or,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not trying to question, I'm just
No.
trying to find, how often do we use these dogs?
Right. We get a few requests a month to go out and do things such as demonstrations or sniffs and things like that. We're going throughout all of Clay County to do it, all the rural areas, along with the areas in the city. So there's a few a month that we're doing, just some of those sniffs and demonstrations, but we're also doing several during their work week and things like that, to where they're on traffic stops, people are requesting the dog to come and assist with that, or people are requesting the dog to come and assist to do a track and things of that nature. So there's several requests that are going on a week, even when they're on shift and things like that as well.
I mean, I'm glad that we're utilizing that.
And
Just
that's-
wondering how often we use them.
That's on both sides of the river. When we don't have a canine usage, we'll request one, and they'll come over and help us.
Okay.
But it'd be nice to have that coverage for us in Clay County all the time, because there are times where there's no dogs in the area, from Fargo to Cass or our side. Having that coverage for us with the dog would be huge, I think.
Yeah, just last week, we requested a canine from the city of Fargo in Holly, and they happily came out to assist us as well, but there's gonna be times where that dog isn't available at all.
So we're allowed to bring dogs across, but we can't bring them
Yeah, I can
in. Something else, okay.
Spoiled gravel.
Yeah.
Kenny, go ahead.
How about, does the city of Moorhead have a canine unit?
Yeah, right now they're down to 1 canine as well. They're in the process of getting a second canine. They had 2, the one retired, so now they're working on getting their second one fired up again.
When we had 2 canines, we were using them a lot. And they are a PR tool also, and that's what we want to create. We created that with Canine Deacon, is that PR component of it also, because it's the citizen's dog too. I mean, we use them as much as we can.
How long is the training period?
For the canine to start, it's about 3 months for their apprehension and tracking training, and it's another month to do the drug and all the narcotic training. And the cost that we're looking at is right around $30,000 that we're hoping to raise for this. That would include the cost of the dog and training, which is about $10,000 to $14,000, and then the hotel room and per diem and things like that for the deputy to be gone for that amount of time, as well as the equipment in the car.
Kevin?
One of your current deputies would assume that handler position then, right?
Correct, yeah. We've, just in some conversations with some of the deputies, I mean, I think we have about 4 or 5 that would be interested in that, so we would have to go through a selection process to be able to trim that down.
I guess my point was, is you wouldn't be coming to us asking for an additional person.
No, we wouldn't do that. The only thing that we would, and that would come out of our budget would be the canine maintenance and things like that.
And I think then that deputy's vehicle probably has just a little extra
Yeah,
setup to it.
yeah, we would have to probably take out their cage and stuff like that and put in a canine cage and things of that nature. So there's little cost associated with that, but that would be included in the 30,000 that we would raise.
Well, I think one can go out to the Clay County Fair and see that when the sheriff deputy and their canine unit is there, how much the public enjoys seeing that and having that. It's a pretty good indication, and I'm going to support your request.
I appreciate that. And the other reason coming up here too is to also give you guys a heads up that we're doing it, because I would hate to have you guys to be out in the public and somebody say, hey, I donated to your canine program, and you look at them like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So,
In the past, when we did the fundraising, we came up with the money, and then we came to the board saying we had it. Well, we wanted to front load it with you guys to get approval to do it, so you knew what was coming.
I don't think you're going to have any trouble.
For the board's wishes,
I would move approval of the request or permission to seek donations for the canine unit.
I'll second the motion.
motion and a second to approve the request. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Thank you very
There you
much.
go, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next item is request from City of Felton to receive a tax forfeit parcel for authorized public use.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We are here today with Mr.
Jeff Rader.
from the city of Georgetown, and Kurt.
Felton, sorry,
Felton,
Felton,
I'm
that's
sorry,
all
Felton. Should be looking at my notes here. The city is requesting a piece of tax forfeit property be withheld from the tax forfeit sale in order for them to formulate a plan to make this into a recycling center. And that would make it free of charge for them, since it's going to be used for a public purpose. Everyone would be able to get to use it. He's going to give you the plan that they kind of have come up with to do with the property, and our Clay County is collaborating with them to help them create this recycling place.
What I have, I guess, is the application, which needs to be, if approved, needs to be signed. And also just a basic map. I mean, it's not a elaborate plan. It's as simple as the property that we're mentioning is a piece of, I mean, the city's been taking care of it for the last few years, so we have, and it's the house.
Vacant lot?
No, there's a house on it, but the house is, they didn't, when the people left, they didn't shut the water off, didn't notify the city, filled up with water, so we shut it off. The people, when they left, basically destroyed, and the house isn't, I mean, the basic of the house was built, it's one of the oldest houses in Felton, actually. It's an old granary, to be honest with you, is what it is. So the best thing to do would be to, it's an eyesore, it's a rodent, it attracts rodents. I mean, it should be cleaned up, and which the city will get stuck with probably anyway, regardless of what happens, but we'd like to put it to good use, I guess, is what our plan would be. But I mean, it's as basic, and I can say this is a simple map. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, I want to grab this.
Simple map. That's the piece of property. It's on the north side of town. They're right on the end of Main Street. Just basically green space the property, and then try to put a building of some sort on it, and where we can put the recycling bins inside and sort of monitor. Right now we have recycling bins, but they're on a piece of property that's between the cities and actually the counties, by the county shop in Felton, and it's not monitored. Rural residents seem to come in and want to deposit some things in it, and it's full a lot of times with things that shouldn't be in it, and we just want to get a better handle on it, make it more of a, even aesthetically better for the city and for the county, safer.
And I think from what, our conversation earlier, there's a lot of smaller towns in Clay County that are going to hearing from people that they want these recycling bins present, and that's great, and we do our best to kind of work with them, and the problem does arise when they're either too full or overflowing, and then they start blowing, and then we're dealing with issues on how to fix it. And personally, I drop our stuff off in Sabin in an enclosed building when it's open, a few hours during the week, and it seems to be a good way to handle excess volume, but also kind of deal with that mess that could occur if they get overfull.
So the intention is to take the building down?
Right, the city would need to take it down, dispose of it. I mean, obviously we talked to the county to see if it's inspected for, I know the fire department came to our meeting and asked about possibly practicing.
I would suggest you check into that. It might reduce your costs.
Right.
Along with even law enforcement, sometimes they like to do training going into buildings.
So which is, we'd love to do.
Yeah,
We can.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So,
Right, you had something?
No, I attended their city meeting too, when they discussed this last week, and seems like a good plan up there, and I make a motion we approve this.
It does have to be a resolution. By resolution.
A resolution. Do we have that, or?
Oh, nope, I didn't send one. I'll get one. Sorry.
You give it to me, I'll get it.
Gotcha.
But I mean,
We can still approve it, I think.
I'll approve this, I don't know whether we call it a resolution.
What's the next resolution number that would come out to 2019-24? Didn't we just do 23?
Yeah, we just did
24 is
23.
on the schedule, so which one are you? Change order.
Huh?
I think your motion could just be the
Let's just
receipt.
do it,
Resolution.
get it done. Next resolution, whatever the next resolution number is.
Right.
24.
No, 24 is on the schedule.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to
Kirk,
approve
the,
the resolution.
The plan that Felton has for that, is that going to be all inside?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, we've just started talking about it, and I think that's their intent. Virtually all the cities, Georgetown and Ullin and Hitterdall, all the communities up in that area all have enclosed facilities, and I think that would be the route we'd like to go in that area as well.
And I guess that I think their budgets and the solid waste budgets would dictate that. I just wonder about the ability of having a fence type too as a possibility, where that kind of can help resolve some of the debris issues. And I think it also allows opportunities to go beyond, as though what Commissioner Mojo mentioned, where you have only a specified drop-off period on a given day. I'm just trying to find the best way to utilize that thing in the most convenient and best way for your citizens, and at the less cost. So so I think I just hope you will continue to have dialogue with our solid waste department, with the city of Felton, and coming up with the best plan that's affordable.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, we intend to work with them very, very closely.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign, motion carries. Thanks.
Thank you. Good luck.
I think you need something signed. Jeff, did you need something signed this morning?
Yeah, but I think the commissioner, someone has to be signed by the commissioner here as well. I think it's on that second page of the application.
And he doesn't have to wait till the...
Or come back.
County board.
I can do it.
Yeah, I can just fill that part in.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Good
Now I'll
enough.
get to the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks. Okay, next is request approval of revisions childcare licensing policy. Good morning.
Morning. Morning. We got the gangs all here. Okay, we have several fee policies that we've been looking to clean up. So I have a few of our staff here to help me with that. You've met Amy before. Amy Amundsen is licensing of our ongoing child protection, but she's been licensing supervising all of our licensing programs. And Jessica Mickelson is our new supervisor, just started a few weeks ago, so she's taking over the licensing program. So I invited her to join us today, get a flavor of the board and sitting up at the table. And David Hallman is one of our licensors, been with us for years, currently licenses our community residential service sites. So I asked him to join us because just to talk about one of our fee policies, we're asking the board to consider increase in our fees for corporate care settings. And so Dave has some good connection and knowledge with our providers and can offer some feedback. So I think we'll start with in your packet, yes, you did get the documents with red on them. At the top it says family child care licensing inspection fees. So we'll start with that document.
Do you have like attachment E or F or, I'm guessing?
E, F, and G.
It's E.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so this document really is, we are following what the statute allows us to do. So the statute allows us to only collect so much in fees, and you'll notice that what we simply have done is deleted the fees that we are charging for the background checks, because that's all done in a different process now. So that's just been deleted from this document. So nothing else has changed. We're continuing to charge the $50 for initial processing application fee and then $100 at relicensing. And again, this is for our child daycare homes. So I don't know, Amy, if you have anything to add on this, but it's really just cleaning this up and making sure that we're in compliance with the statute.
I think the key to this is, when I read all of this, my first thing is, okay, so we're eliminating fees for background checks. We're not eliminating the background checks.
No.
That's the important thing that the public is going to.
Correct. Yeah, no, the background checks are still done, and maybe you can speak to how that's changed.
Yes, they're going through a new program called Net Study 2.0, so they go and do their fingerprints over at CCRI. They pay a fee there, and then it goes in, and all the same checks are done.
All at the state level.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're no longer involved in that process.
So Rhonda, your budget used to include dollars that was collected for this, then it was just used to pay the expenditure of it.
Right.
And now it's just going to not be part of your budget anymore?
Correct.
It's gonna-
Correct.
Okay.
And it wasn't a lot, because quite honestly, let's see, we haven't been doing the background checks for child care homes for how long?
Just a few months.
Just a few months,
Yeah.
okay, so we'll start to see that, but we also don't have the staff time
Right.
involved in it as well.
Okay.
So, looking for,
Any other questions?
How many childcare do we have in Clay County? I mean, this is anything to do with it, but how many childcare do we have in Clay County?
licensed childcare homes, about 150, 160? Yep. Yep. We don't license childcare centers, those are licensed by the state, so the family childcare homes are
Is what this is.
yes.
I would move approval of the policy and procedure manual attachment E.
Second the motion.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Okay, so F must be in your packet, the document.
Community residential.
Yeah, community residential services. So you'll see there the red additions and the strikeouts for this document. Again, this is, we started collecting fees in 2017. for community residential services. I call it corporate care settings. So it's the agencies like CCRI, MCRS, Access, where they have licensed sites in our community, which Dave works on the licensing process, and they provide foster care, whether it be child foster care or adult foster care for folks with disabilities in our community. And the statutes, you'll see the statute references there, but the statute allows us to recoup some of the costs that our agency has in doing that licensing process as an extension of the state. So Dave goes through all of the licensing process, sends his recommendation down to the state, and then they issue the license. So we have been charging, you'll see there $350 for the initial licensing inspection, and then $200 for the relicensing inspection. The statute allows us to charge $500, and honestly, as we did a little bit of a survey statewide to find out what's happening around the state and what our provider is charging, the majority are charging that $500. The $500 does not recover all of our costs in terms of staff time, in terms of doing that license. So we think it's reasonable for us to increase our fees to the statute allowed amount. I did ask David if he would send a letter out to our providers just to let them know that we were going to be making this proposal to you for consideration. And do you want to talk about, you didn't get much response.
I sent, there's 13 corporations do business as community residential settings in Clay County. I sent letters out, I also sent emails. I got no response other than one time when I was with one of them, they said I thought that was already in effect, so that's the only response I got. I believe when we did this in 2008, we got 3 responses. So.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you included letting them know in this process and looking for feedback, and I guess from my point, if there's not a whole lot of response, I guess they maybe think that it's probably a fair amount.
And that was sent on 12th February, so it's been 3 months.
Okay.
And we are proposing that the rate increase happen January of 2020. That would allow our providers to, plan for that in their next budget. So we would keep things consistent for the rest of this year, and then starting January, we would change that fee structure with your approval. We also did kind of a time study to assess how much does it cost us in terms of Dave's time, and we do have another licensor in terms of the initial license as well as the relicense. On average, it'll cost us about $1,400 for a new license, and at renewal time about $850 to go through that process. And that's a fairly conservative amount.
Does that depend on the size of the business, or?
That's one of the big ones. How long I stay out there for a 1-person site versus a 5-person site. And also it depends on the provider, how well prepared they are.
That was my question. You're saying it costs us $1,400 and we can only charge $500. Are we pursuing to increase these fees through the state or anything like that? Or are we just going to say, well, we'll collect $500?
Yeah. I don't know that there's any activity that I'm aware of around increasing the fees. It's kind of difficult because as a community, we do need these providers to develop sites for us to help us to provide services. So both for children and adults. So we need them, we want them to look at licensed sites, we want them to be able to take referrals that we make to them for folks that need these kinds of services. And at the same time, they're a business as well, and it does cost us in order to do it. So it's a bit of a balance to try to look at that. I'm not aware of any activity around increasing these fees right now, but it's certainly something.
Kevin Jensen.
I guess, Commissioner Gross, my thought on that is that this is something that the corporations can pay a part of, but I also think that the county should help in that investments with the difference between the $500 and the $1,400, because the alternative cost to the counties, if we didn't have these places to go, would be extremely higher. You know, we look at what our average daily cost is per bed in some of our other facilities, and they're astronomical in comparison to what might be $800 or $900 a year.
Right.
So I think we need to do whatever we can to encourage more foster care facilities, whether they're privately or corporate, I don't care, but I think we need more of them. And the lower we can keep those rates, the better we are.
I'll have to agree with you on that. I mean, but Zach, last year we asked everybody to come with their fees and what's it costing us to process them. And we asked each department to either increase or decrease the fees accordingly. And now we're saying, oh, this is okay on this one, but.
Well,
And I agree with
right.
you. I'm not again opposed to it. You know.
But it's also similar to our discussion we had in terms of the highway engineer when we were doing road access studies. The fee is not going to cover the entire cost of what processing that would be. I mean, obviously, we have taxes for that. I think the fees basically are to kind of help out with a small part of what it would cost. And I appreciate the fact that we're increasing this incrementally. I would be nervous about increasing it from $200 to $1,400. So I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, and honestly, 500 is the max the statute allows.
Right.
So we can't,
I realize that. I
yeah,
agree
we
with
can't
that.
assess anymore at this point. But it's certainly fair, and I think as Dave indicated, his outreach to our providers suggests to me that they probably see it as fair as well, because if they have homes in other counties, they're likely being charged the $500 in those counties. So it's not a surprise.
Okay, what are the board's wishes
I'll
on
make a
this?
motion to approve the recommended items for attachment F.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay,
Thank you for that outreach to them too.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
good. Good to do that.
Good job.
Thank you, David. Okay, the last one is the out-of-home placement fee schedule. You guys can stay. You can stay for a moment. So this policy we have not reviewed with you since 2010. And you'll see just a lot of strikeout on this document. We actually had done some work on this with Jenny Samarja when she was here, just cleaning this up in terms of how we practice with our out-of-home placement fees. You'll see at the top a lot of statutes and rules that kind of govern what we can and can't do. So basically what this is a lot of cleanup, basically. We will continue to use our child support guidelines to determine parents' ability to help support the costs of their kids in out-of-home placement, so that is not changing at all. Statutes do not allow us to charge any fees for people who are below the federal poverty level. So right away, if families are below the federal poverty level, they're not assessed a fee. There's two parts to fees for out-of-home placements. One is we look at is if the child has any income attributable to the child. So for example, child support, if a child is getting Social Security, if a child is getting adoption assistance, anything like that. So we look at any income that is intended directly for the child. And in some cases, that just gets redirected to the county for the cost of care. So for example, child support, it might just get redirected to the county. The second part is over and above the child's income, does the parent or parents have an ability to contribute to the cost of care? And that's where we use the child support guidelines. So it gets referred to that unit for assessment. We communicate with the parents about that fee assessment, and within the policy now and with these changes, Parents do have the ability to submit a hardship request to our agency for us to consider if there's factors that need to be considered in the fee schedule. Surprisingly, most of the income we receive for out-of-home placements in terms of this policy is from the child's income getting redirected to the agency. So either child support or Social Security. You know, a good number of parents don't have a fee over and above that. But when they do, they can indicate if there is a hardship, and we will consider those factors. The other primary change you'll see is if you flip the page over to number 18. Number 18 talks about the types of placements that we would be assessing fees for. We are requesting that we totally delete that section, and back on the first page under purpose, it just says we're going to assess fees for really any placement, any voluntary placement, any court-ordered placement, or any police hold. It's just simplifying it, because we have not been assessing fees for kids that go into the secure side of the juvenile detention center. And we have had parents say, well, my kid was in secure detention and I didn't have a fee, and they went down to the non-secure and now I have a fee. I want my child to go back up to secure. We will assess a fee no matter where they're at and follow the policy. There are some nuances to kids who are placed based on correctional reasons. So for example, if the crime they've committed is against a family member, or maybe they steal a family car, or, you know, those are considerations that we will consider when we're assessing fees in consultation with the county attorney's office as well as the placing agent. So it just makes it clean that we will look at fees for any or all of our types of placements. Those are the basic changes.
I have a question on 22.
Okay.
So what it says, if parents do not pay the bill or provide the requested financial information, they'll be billed for the full cost of care. Is there a day, I mean, given how long do they have to pay that bill?
Well, that's one of the hardship things that we could work with parents on. If they have a fee, we could set up a payment plan, for example, that maybe they pay so much monthly or whatnot. But sometimes, you know, as you know from our work, we have kids that go into out-of-home placement, not at the request of the parent, but maybe it's because of a maltreatment issue or some other criminal issue. And so we have parents that don't necessarily want to provide the financial information we need in order to assess what their obligation may or may not be. And oftentimes we work with the court in having language in the court order that says, as parents, you must cooperate with social services in completing this paperwork.
I guess it's just confusing if there's not a date on there. I mean, when I get a bill at my house, if, you know, pay by, it helps me to know. And so I understand that if it's a fluid date based on what the courts say, that maybe we wouldn't have that.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know this for sure, but it is, I believe that when the auditors send out the invoice for the bill, they may have a date on it, although I'm not sure. But that's a good point and a good piece for us to look at.
And my other comment, you know this far better than I, just to get this and automatically understand 100% what it says. But so one of my biggest concerns would be that, you know, if this creates more hardship for people who are trying to get their kids back. Do you know what I'm trying to say? I mean, I understand that there's avenues to apply for hardship and there's poverty lines and whatever, but I know that you have to recoup fees and charge that way, but when you have people are honestly trying to get back on their feet and do better, is this creating more hardship? And you know that far better than I, but that's just from the outside looking at that, what comes to mind first.
And that's very fair, and that's something that we do look at, because it certainly can. It certainly can create additional hardship. One of the things that we do need to look at, and part of cleaning this up will allow us to kind of start with a new starting point, and I do see us coming back together to talk a little bit about the child support guidelines, because they have changed a bit since we've been doing fees, and I do think that following the child support guidelines strictly can create more of a hardship than we want to see. So I do think we might want to build in some pieces to that, and I see us probably coming back to you in the next month or so with some additional slight revisions.
And I should also clarify that I'm not saying that we should provide this for free, but I also know that providing the service costs far more than what this is. And so if we're creating undue hardship and kids are needing to be in placement longer, that costs more money than the other piece would.
Yeah. The other thing we would be looking at is if kids are in placements for short periods of time, again, families have to maintain their household, and they often use the Social Security or the child support to maintain the household. So if we're, again, recouping that can make it difficult. So that's an example of some of the hardships that we see and can address case by case.
Kevin?
So we're already incorporating fees in the non-secure.
We are, yes.
And so now this would apply to the secure portion.
Correct.
I guess those people who were in the secure are basically there by court order.
Correct.
So this fee structure, whether there's willingness or not on the part of the parent to pay, the child will still be there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's my first concern, is they're in the right place.
Yeah.
And then secondly, the fee structure, I see here on number 14, it says if insurance coverage is applied to the out-of-home placement cost, then the balance of the non-covered cost is subject to parental fee not to exceed the actual out-of-home placement costs. I think it's an appropriate thing that we look at doing. It just seems that there's so much discretionary thing going on per person that sometimes makes me nervous when you have so many,
Yeah.
That's the concerning part, where it opens the door to maybe, one parent saying they're being treated unfairly in terms of fees versus somebody else. I get a little nervous when it comes to that. And I don't know how. I think that's justified, and I don't know if is it something that as you're going through this process, because you're involved with every one of these processes as they go through the courts and using the county attorney's office, is there something at that point in time that maybe should be considered as they're going through this, and that the court could be aware of what our intentions are for fees, and maybe place that as part of the court? I don't know that process. Tony, I don't know if you have a thought on that, but I think it's then each one, it's treated on its merit, and anticipated fees.
Yeah.
Well, I was just saying, and I don't know if it's been addressed already, but I mean, most people get charged guardian ad litem fees too, say $500. I mean, there's a lot of fees that go involved in these cases. And I mean, I'll just say in the short amount of time I'm doing this, the fees really, at least on my end, I haven't heard an issue about them. I don't, that's my limited input on this,
But I guess it could be a significant issue based on item number 14, the way item number 14 is written, that they could not to exceed the actual out-of-home placement costs. Well, our daily bed price, in the secure detention facility is upwards of $275 a day.
Yeah.
So when you talk about recouping to the total actual out-of-home placement costs in the secure, that's potentially what you could be getting to.
Yeah.
And so Steve, that's the daily cost.
That's correct, yep.
So.
And I know there's been some discussion too, but I mean, it's also my general recollection that, most of these parents do qualify for fee waivers. So few of them
Right.
are gainfully employed that, many times nothing is assessed.
And Mr. Chair, Commissioners, I will say there's a number of counties that are in our membership area that do already charge us in their home counties for secure. So.
And I could just add, this policy, actually, I think this policy cleanup makes it more consistent than perhaps what we've had in the past. It's just, we're gonna assess a fee. The court directs families to cooperate with us. We go through the process, it's fairly clear. And then if there's a hardship, they have a conversation with us. I don't remember the last hardship conversation I've had with a family, which I think speaks to the fees are not getting to the level. I don't know that we've ever assessed a fee for the full cost of care. Now, sometimes what's happened is the families get the letter because they haven't followed through, and then they see the letter with the amount and go, oh, I better get in and meet with them and go through the process. And so that's more what happens. So I do think this policy will actually give us a bit more consistency and more consistent message to families on what our process is. Would you agree, Amy?
Right, and I think we try to be very upfront with families too prior, especially like our voluntary placements where families are wanting their children placed, and we do have that discussion with them prior to placement and have them complete all the paperwork to understand that this could affect any income that they're having and that we need to recoup those costs. So we do work very hard with our families to try to provide them that information prior to placement.
So one final question. So would this apply to the kids who are put in there for our long-term programming?
Yes.
It would apply to that as well?
Yeah, and also in detention, there's no private insurance that pays for detention. So, and the kids lose their medical assistance. So there's no medical assistance reimbursement for detention either. So detention is pretty much straight county-funded service. But yeah, it would involve those kids that are placed in the treatment programs. But I just anecdotally, my belief is that the kids that are in detention have probably also been in non-secure and or other placements. So perhaps families have already gone through the fee assessment process. It just is the minute they go to detention, it drops off. So
Same thing in adult.
Yeah, with the jail. Yeah, so I don't know that, we may be touching these families already with the fee process.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
That's my
What are
question.
the board's wishes on this?
I would move approval of policy and procedure manual, attachment G.
Have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Okay, thank you. Guess I'll stay up here for the next one. Oh, we'll need one of those chairs, I guess.
Okay, next item, request approval of housing support agreement for Commonwealth Development.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, this morning I have Erin Anderson with me from Commonwealth Development. So she's going to share with you a little bit about the application that they are desiring to submit to Minnesota Housing and Finance for a development here in Clay County. And Emma from Lakes and Prairies is here as well, because she's kind of a part of the piece to this project that involves the county and the service delivery for folks that are high priority homeless or folks with disabilities needing housing and support services. So there's a piece to the project that Commonwealth is proposing that the county needs to be involved in for their application. So I'll just let Erin start.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Erin Anderson. I'm with Commonwealth Development Corporation. We are a developer that focuses in affordable housing. We work with primarily with the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program, which is a federal resource that is allocated to each state based on population. So Minnesota gets a certain amount of these tax credits to help us keep rents down for the long term in our projects. So when I say the long term, in this case, it's 40 years of a commitment to providing affordable housing. And with that, we are furthermore trying to, on top of just the affordability piece, we want to also integrate some permanent supportive housing. And in particular, we're looking at integrating a total of 10 units of permanent supportive housing, 6 of which would be for people with disabilities, and 4 for high priority homeless. And in order to do that, we believe the best resource to bring not only rental assistance for those folks, but also services that are needed to integrate into the overall apartment project. We're requesting housing support, which is formerly called GRH, from the county for those 10 units. What we would be doing is essentially working with Lakes and Prairies. We would contract with them, they would provide the services, and the county contract could either be directly with us or with Lakes and Prairies, whichever is more convenient, but I think likely it's going to be directly with Lakes and Prairies, and essentially they would administer the housing support agreement from there for those 10 units. And that would provide the rent, the rent of $504 for these units. It would also pay for their utilities, their other living expenses, including food, laundry. There's other requirements I know that we need to meet to make sure all their basic needs are covered. And Lakes and Prairies will be working with them on that. And then we would also, on top of that, be requesting the supplemental service dollars so that the case management could be provided by Lakes and Prairies so that they could actually spend several hours, about 2 to 3 hours per week per resident, especially initially for the first year, for several months, and then actually from there it would be determined if it could drop off to monthly visits. But the initial piece when a person first moves in is probably going to be the heaviest amount of case management. Let's see, so in terms of the referrals, for the 6 units for people with disabilities, we've been working with the county on developing how that referral would look like, but essentially they are your existing clients that need housing that also have a disability, so that could really be a very broad range of population. But the nice thing about that is there's a lot of flexibility in terms of who we're going to be serving, so that we can really meet whatever the greatest need is at the time. So those referrals would come from the county to Lakes and Prairies, they'd maintain a waiting list for those units, and then as first come, first serve on that waiting list, they would then be placed into the housing as it's available. And our property management staff would be working directly with Lakes and Prairies to make sure that there's continual communication on the front of, we're anticipating a vacancy in this unit. You know, make sure you've got it on your radar. Who do you have coming up that really needs this housing first? And then for the 4 units of high priority homeless, those 4 would need to go through the coordinated entry system. So the regional coordinated entry. So there's a very, I'm sure many of you are familiar with the process, but it's a very calculated process for determining the highest need. And so those 4 units would go through the coordinated entry. I understand there's a very long waiting list with that. So the nice thing is that we're kind of splitting it up. So we've got 6 units that can kind of bypass that coordinated entry and get housing a little bit more efficiently. And then the 4 units through the coordinated entry, more focused on the homelessness component specifically.
So so what I sent to you in your packets. So the county's involvement with this, I'll just go back a piece. So the affordable housing development, again, when you're applying, correct me if I'm wrong too, when you're applying to Minnesota Housing Finance for tax credits to develop affordable housing, one of the pieces on the application, which will make it more attractive for granting purposes, is to serve or to include units that serve folks that are homeless or have disabilities. So as a part of that application, the proposal is for an apartment building, 3 floors, correct? Yes. 46 units, elevator in the apartment building. The proposed site is the 2604 8th Avenue North, which is indicated on the documents there. And I believe you've purchased this piece of property from the city of Moorhead.
We have a purchase agreement.
Okay.
So we haven't purchased it yet, but we have an agreement to purchase it.
Okay. And so the 10 units in this 46 unit proposal is what we're talking about, where the county becomes involved. And we become involved by doing what's called a supportive housing agreement with either Commonwealth or Lakes and Prairies to serve the folks in these 10 units. And what's a bit unique about this arrangement, which we don't have in any of our current situations, is that 6 of those units, as Aaron said, would be referrals from the county social services or Lakes and Prairies. And why that's important to us is because you've heard us come and talk with you before about maybe folks that are in state-operated services that have stabilized enough to come and live in our community, and we can't find just private market housing for them. Or maybe we're working with a family in our child protection system and we have kids in out-of-home care, and we have a mom or a dad or a couple who cannot find housing because of maybe some poor rental history, maybe some other issues in their background that are making it difficult for them to find housing. So this would be an appropriate referral that we could work on in prioritizing them for one of these 10 units if they meet all the other requirements. So I like this agreement that we've talked about in terms of how we would handle some of those units that could help us manage some of the families that we're serving within our systems. So again, we're kind of talking about, in the scope of their 46 units, we're really talking about a housing support agreement for the 10. So,
Rhonda, what you just described, there are several apartment buildings throughout, for example, Moorhead, that qualify for this same type of agreement with the county, correct?
Yes.
So this is, it's nothing new.
No.
To our community or to our neighborhoods.
Correct.
It's been going on for a long time.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we have a number of housing support agreements out there. I should have counted before we left, but probably 40 or more. Some of them are what we call scattered sites in the community, so it's just, and Emma, you can probably know some of this better than I, but, you know, individuals rent units in the community, and we provide the client themselves is eligible for the housing support. And then we have the service side, which helps them to be successful in their housing unit, as well as services and keeping folks stably housed.
So if I could, can I just follow up with two? Yeah. So I have just two more questions. And maybe you can, I'll just ask them both and you can reply. But Commissioner Wayland, I had an opportunity to sit in on with you and Lakes and Prairies and several others when this proposal was presented. And we talked about these 10, and I remember there was some discussion about how many 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedrooms. So
Yeah.
if you can comment on that, but before you do that, I'll just ask both my questions, and then in terms of the 4 high priority ones whose decision comes from a regional standpoint as opposed to Clay County, is there, do we have any options in the regional approach that we can still have a priority for county residents first?
Preference?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Emma, could you speak to how that?
I don't believe we can if we're going by the coordinated entry rules. However, when you break down who's all on our coordinated wait list, there's 440 households currently homeless in Clay County that identify Clay County as their home. And the next greatest number would be Becker County at 86. Douglas has 54, Otter Tail has 40, and then all the rest have less than 10.
So from a percentage standpoint, it would be likely that there'd be.
Yeah, very likely.
Emma, what, in order to claim Clay County as home, is there a 6-month residency requirement, 2-week?
We go off of self-report when we interview people, but in order to be eligible for the housing supports through the county, they would have to be a resident.
Yes.
So
30 days, I
Yeah.
believe is this.
And is that required, I apologize, is that a state statute requirement that it's a 30-day? I think you probably know why I'm asking that. I mean, we are a border.
Yeah. The housing support program is a state program, and it's state funds. Let me see, in terms of the residency requirement, I don't know that I have that. I'll look as.
And that's fine if you don't have it, but.
Frank, did you have a question?
Yeah, what we're talking about.
Can I get the answer on that bed thing?
Sure.
Yeah. Because I see here the rate per bed is, it goes up to 904, but if, I thought there was some discussion that if it was a 2-bedroom thing, it would be less costly than a 3 or 4-bedroom, so.
Yeah, well, so the reason for that, the reason it's $504 across the board, no matter what size the unit is, has to do with the utility allowance, because a larger unit's going to have higher utilities. So that's why at the end of the day, we have to make sure to allow room for that. So basically, we calculated the lowest rent once you account for those utilities on a 3-bedroom unit, and then made that the same rent for all the units, because it doesn't make sense to go the other direction with it. Otherwise, the 2-bedroom would be more rent than the 3-bedroom, and that doesn't make any sense because of that utility allowance differential. So we just set it at the same rate for all of them. The other thing that we did find out from Minnesota Housing Finance Agency is that we do have some flexibility in the long term to shift based on the need, the bedroom size. So like if there's more demand in the 2-bedroom area, they're okay with us kind of floating these units a little bit and shifting over time, as long as we have 10 total. I mean, there will be a requirement, there has to be 10 total permanent supportive housing units, but there's gonna be some flexibility to move within there in terms of the unit composition.
Did that answer your question, Kevin?
Yes, thank you.
I have a question on when you classify people as homeless, you know, you have to be homeless to qualify for this. Okay, once you put them into this apartment, they're not homeless anymore. So how long can they stay in there? I mean, how long am I considered homeless?
And that's only, and just to be clear, that's only for the 4 out of the 10 that they would need to be
So how long do I have to
homeless.
be homeless? I mean, how long can I be considered homeless to stay in there? Can I stay in there 1 month, a year, 2 years, or can I stay in there forever then?
Once somebody moves in, they could stay in as long as they're meeting their lease. It's a standard 1-year lease. So they could stay in for the long term.
And I think it's important.
It's not transitional
The partnership
housing.
with Lakes and Prairies is where that importance comes in, because the service, from being on Lakes and Prairies board, there are programs in place to help these people get back on their feet, life skills training. It really is an opportunity to, one, get someone out of homelessness and into a supportive housing, but then you're able to apply for a job and have an address on your job application. And so it may seem small because it's only 10, but I think the services with Lakes and Prairies really kind of helps stop the cycle of homelessness.
Well, I think that I agree with that. I mean, they get a job and they get themselves back on their feet. And that's why I ask. Now you're back on your feet, you got a job, you're working. You can still stay in there then.
Well, in the housing support funds that are made available per client, the client is eligible based on income and asset limits as well. So as they become in a better spot and become employed and increase their wages, at some point they may be ineligible for the housing support program, and therefore ineligible to remain in those units as well.
But eligible because they can afford it to stay in the other units that will be available.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
I mean,
Yes.
I mean, that's the other piece, is that this is a development in Clay County that has a significant amount of units, so.
Yeah.
It's an option.
Well, the vast majority of it is still regular.
Right.
Right. So if, all of a sudden we're looking at, let's just say it's a 2-bedroom at $694 a month, if they're kind of shifting from the housing support program to a more typical unit within the development, that's kind of roughly what we're looking at, affordability-wise.
This is, obviously the zoning and stuff is all okay with City of Moorhead and.
Yeah, it's already, actually, we didn't need to rezone at all. The city has been planning on this parcel having multifamily housing for some time now, and they already had it zoned appropriately. The site was of adequate size so that we didn't need any variances from a building perspective. We have all the utilities, and if you're familiar with the area, the city actually did a number of improvements in that area, including new sidewalks, and brought all the utilities in and so forth. So it's prepped and ready to go, and we meet the zoning requirements.
Just what, will that face north?
The building, like the front door, you mean?
Yeah.
The front, I think, is technically facing the parking lot to the south. Because most people are gonna come in, park, and then go into the building.
I know where it's at, I'm just trying to visualize how it would look.
Sure.
Any other questions? What are the board's wishes on this item?
The motion I think we would be looking for is what I submitted to you is the 2 documents that I would be supplying to Erin to include in her submission for Minnesota Housing Finance, and they would be signed by myself as basically partnering on the project and committing to housing support services for those 10 units.
With that, so are you saying page 1 of 3, 2 of 3, and 3 of 3 is?
I don't have your numbering. The first one is
So you have-
dated May 14th at the top, housing support funding commitment. So one, yep.
Or just
I
this?
think that one, yep. And then the second document says letter of confirmation.
Yeah, okay, so the letter of confirmation, that's the
Yeah.
one I'm getting at.
Yep.
So page 2 of 3 has a lot of things not filled in. What's, should they be filled in?
Yeah, no, it's because that top section, does not apply to this situation.
Okay.
Because of their 46 units, not all of them are the housing support, only 10 of them are. So if the whole building was housing support, the way we read it was that top section would need to be completed.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That's correct, and I confirmed that with the Minnesota Housing, that section, it says 100%, if 100% of the building is permanent supportive housing, that section gets filled out. And also, if it's helpful, Commissioner Campbell, I could send you the site plan. We have a preliminary site plan and floor plans and elevations prepared for the application.
You can send that to our administrator and then we all could.
Right.
Okay. That would be helpful. I'll make a motion to approve the request and designate Rhonda as the signatory for Clay County.
We have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I guess I'm just, okay, so in the cover letter, that would be going to, who's this going to?
Well, I would supply it to Erin and you would submit this
The
with
letter
your
that says housing support funding commitment at the
Yeah.
top.
Mhm.
Yes, that's a requirement for the application to Minnesota Housing, that we provide evidence that we've had this conversation. It's not a very firm commitment. If you look through it, it's very, pretty much just saying you acknowledge that, this is something that we're looking at doing, and then down the road, there's an actual formal housing support agreement that'll get
Okay,
signed.
so the reason I asked that, and it might get into a little bit of technicalities here, but attachment A, or attachment H, or this is basically a cover letter. That's all that really is. Where we really get into where we're committing is the letter of confirmation for local human services. That's to me the document that binds us as a county. And again, nowhere in that binding document, because nothing's filled out, does it say that we are agreeing to 10.
Yeah, it does. It says 46 total, 4 number with the high priority households and 6 total
Oh,
number
okay.
of people with
Okay.
disabilities.
All right, there it is.
And I guess in my motion,
Okay.
I felt that there was enough information on here to clarify that there was.
Okay, I guess I see that now. Okay, good.
So how much is that gonna affect our budget? I mean, do we?
It won't. The housing support program is a state-funded program. We just administer it. We just administer the program like we do some of our other state and federal programs.
Okay.
I also want to clarify, item number 2 on the page 3 of 3, towards the end, talks about Clay County's involvement in the planning, but also talks about identifying 10 for the funding resource. So.
Yeah, these forms are Minnesota Housing Finance forms. They're kind of template, and that's what they want us to fill out. So they're a little lacking with some detail, but they go along with a lot of other things. Also, just if I'll draw to your attention on page 2 of 3 in the center there. And we've reviewed this before when we've done housing support agreements. It does say that completion of this form does not constitute a commitment by the county or tribal nation to fund services and is not to be considered an approval of the proposed housing site or services. Again, it really is working on with those 10 units and identifying as a county, we're identifying a need for housing support services. And we're acknowledging that through their application process.
Well, based on her number that we have 400
Yeah.
families, it's,
Yeah.
it seems to me there's a need.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for developing in Clay County.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's great.
happy to be here.
Okay, Steve, let's see, approval of change order number 24 with increase in guaranteed maximum price for the juvenile detention center. So,
Good morning again, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. As you mentioned, we have a change order number 24. All the items here pertain to the juvenile center project. A total here today before you is $181,869. I'd like to note that AS 006 and CP 030 have already been addressed by this board and approved just due to the timing of the project. And so we haven't been able to capture that in a change order yet. And so that is not a new additional cost, but something we've already addressed. Just kind of touching on a few of the different issues here, PR 008, CP 031, and PR 14 are all code issues that came up as far as the fire inspection. We had some minor lentils issues in heating and cooling issues that caused some additional lentil needs. We had a slab transition from our building, the existing building settled and has settled in a few areas, so they had to have some transition flooring there, and then the glycol system modifications of PR 010 address some of the needing to move some of the piping in order to be able to flush the system. So this would have an impact on the guaranteed maximum price. I know this has been an issue that we've talked about on the board level a great deal. I think there's been some discussion, Commissioner Whalen and Commissioner Campbell, at the most recent advisory board, and so they've began discussing some ways to make sure that we have the appropriate contingencies to get through the end of the project.
I might want to add that, and I can maybe touch on it a little bit too during my committee report, but we had an opportunity yesterday after our construction meeting to take a tour of that facility. It's my second chance at looking at that. And I'll tell you what, when you go in there and you see what's going on there right now, you can understand why there was the need for contingencies and it is quite the cluster. And it's you get a better indication of how difficult that had to have been from an architecture standpoint and from a construction manager standpoint to understand what they couldn't see until they open it up.
Right. Yeah.
So, and again, I state this, and it's kind of why we decided to, one of the reasons why we decided to build a new correctional facility as opposed to remodeling, because it's just far more expensive. And we're seeing that, but we didn't really have the opportunity or options to construct new here in this particular case. But we're close. I think right now it shows we're probably
just about 75%.
Well, yeah, but I think in terms of the contingencies, With what we've approved, what's approved here, and with what we know is pending, right now, we would probably exceed the owner contingency by about $100,000. And as Commissioner Whalen said, we are about 72% complete. And so we're sitting at, you know, with these things, there are a couple of credits coming, but there are some still other things going on. The contractor contingency, of course, if that isn't used, that comes back to us. That is still sitting in the black by $51,000, you know, so, but we, you know, I think we've, as our administrator mentioned, we did report to our 11-member counties that this contingency was potentially a problem, and so what happens there isn't going to be solely the responsibility of Clay County in terms of whatever excess there is in that contingency. So we might have to make some alterations. We're going to have to determine how much of those contingencies were secure versus not secure, and I've asked them to make sure they do that. So again, this is, you know, not the greatest news, but you know, you look at the other side of things, and I'll report on the two other issues that we have there. We're sitting with close to $750,000 or $700,000 plus still in those contingencies, with those projects almost complete. So I think overall we're, of all projects, we're still financially in good shape. So
I think you do get a better perspective too when you take a tour of it.
Oh,
So, Steve,
yeah.
if the other commissioners are interested, maybe
Yeah,
at
they
some
should.
point
Absolutely.
you can get a tour for them so they can see what's actually
You'll-
going on
you'll-
over there. So it's,
we'll get an understanding of just how, I mean, right now is the time to go see that, to see how
Yeah, it's
massive
it's
undertaking
pretty-
that is.
it is a
It's
massive
really
undertaking.
something, yeah. So anyway, I, you know, thank you, Stephen, for your report on this, and I do want to say that James and Josh are doing everything they can over there to keep this thing, they're not asking for major, you know, so they're doing good, so.
okay. What are the board's wishes?
Mr., I would move that we approve the change order number 24.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, same sign, motion carries. Thanks, Steve. Committee reports, Kevin.
Okay. On Thursday, last Thursday, I attended the Lakes Country Service Co-op meeting, and it was actually a real short meeting. They talked about the Delta Dental Renewal Plan, and we did approve the fiscal year 20 budget. And there was really no more discussion on the proposed Title IV building that they're going into purchasing that could house potentially 50 Title IV students throughout the Lakes Country region. Then on yesterday, we had the juvenile center and the jail and LEC. I've touched enough on the juvenile construction one. When it comes to the LEC and correctional facility, you can look out there for yourselves and see that the building is being framed nicely, and it won't be long, it'll be fully enclosed. They have a big roof work detail going on right now. If you go across across the hall and look out the window, you'd see a lot of roofers up there. So that's moving along quite nicely. There was one item in the contingency that, that was fairly significant in that regard, and that came out of the contractor contingency this spring as they were doing the work over here. Because of the late winter and the frost, they had to actually remove some frozen dirt and bring in fresh dirt, or they would have seen significant delays. And so they, under the contractor contingency, they can do that, and they don't necessarily need, well, they need our approval, but it's something that we've given them so much money and they can do it. But that amounted to $14,756. So they had to basically take some fill out and bring non-frozen fill in so they could finish the foundation work and that type of thing. And that's basically a cost of the late winter. And again, I want to mention that currently the LEC shows we had a contingency of $250,000, and we have a remaining balance of $250,000. That's in the LEC. So we still have that full amount that was never. There was some contingency used, but they were transferred from owner to contractor contingencies. So then in the contractor contingencies in the LEC, the original number was 254. There's still 75,000 left there. So in the LEC, we're looking at 325,000 still there. And then everything now that's being done over there is pretty much warranty work.
Mm-hmm.
Then in the correctional facility, the owner contingency is at roughly 55,000. That's 81% complete. And there's really not a lot of surprises left to go through there. And then in the contractor contingency, there still remains 187,000. So when you do the math on those, it's close to, it's about 700,000 still in those two projects. And that's enough to report on those, unless there's questions by any of you. And then last night I attended the Buffalo Red River Watershed meeting in Barnesville, and there was our technical team, Bob Zimmerman, our technical team from the Diversion Authority, Bob Zimmerman and Greg Thielman, gave a report on the Buffalo Red on their agenda called it Plan C. It was known as Alternative C in this Minnesota EIS and the federal EIS system, and that's a lot of people have called it Charlie Anderson's plan. And so there was, they gave a report on why the DNR excluded that plan. And then, after all of that was done, then they went into executive session and they came out because their time frame, the Diversion Authority had applied for a permit on January 28th, and normally they have to respond within 60 days of that. Well, that would have been March 28th, but the Buffalo Red can continue that based on if they have questions that they need answers to. And so over that process, they did submit questions in writing to our technical group, and they've responded. And they went into, and they came out and they voted to send a letter to the Diversion Authority asking them to extend their time for a decision till June 24th, I believe it is, whatever that meeting is in June. And in the meantime, they basically had 3 areas. Excuse me if I'm going to have to go to my notes here. They basically had 3 areas that they wanted to talk about. I'm sorry. Okay, now I'm not getting very good service here. Okay, so the 3 areas that they talked about is the Buffalo Red wants a meeting with the Minnesota DNR, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and the Diversion Authority regarding property mitigation requirements, and it was really in regards to condition number 22 on the DNR permit, and it has to do with their biggest concern is regarding the PMF, which is the probable maximum flood. So they really put stipulations on a lot of lands based on that condition. And, you know, I think there's the opinion of the Buffalo Red, and it's actually shared by the Diversion Authority and all of our local people that condition is probably excessive. And because of that condition, it extends to lands that probably, in other words, there's lands that have to deal with what could be building above the requirements above the 100-year floodplain, whereas in any place else, even within the cities, you only have to build to the 100-year floodplain. It's a little bit technical for me, but I'm trying to summarize the best I can. So they're trying to work and see if there can be some mitigation on that issue with the DNR. That's not a condition that was put on by the Corps. It was a condition that was put on by the DNR. So we'll see where that goes. Item number 2, and we do agree that conversations should be had with the DNR now. We as a diversion authority, we agree with that should move forward. Item number 2, the Buffalo Red River Watershed drafted permit conditions, and they were presented to the Diversion Authority, and the Diversion Authority, through our technical team, did reply to those conditions, and they're saying that they need a little bit more time to review our answers to those questions or those conditions. And then their third thing is they said that they will need to have a meeting with their legal counsel regarding the Minnesota DNR contested case issue. Well, that should not be a condition of the permit, because that has nothing to do with the permit. That should, and they even say that there's no deadline for that. It's just an ongoing thing. But it, you know, so that's really so it says here that they indicated they plan to take action at their June 24th meeting. In their letter to us, it's going to say that they would plan on taking action on our permit at their June 24th meeting. So that's kind of the recap of that meeting. So it's going to go, obviously that letter's they're going to be sending that out as early as today to our Diversion Authority board. And so our Diversion Authority board will have to act on that letter a week from Thursday at our regular meeting. I'm sorry these get long, but I get accused in public meetings if I don't provide enough detail on these issues. So, especially from one of my friends over in Cass County, he likes to criticize me for not giving reports. So there you go.
Tell them to come to one of our meetings.
Hey, you're welcome to come.
Prove them wrong. So. Frank?
Well, I got about 3 weeks of meetings because I missed last week, I guess, but I'm sure back in April 23rd, that management retreat's been discussed, and that night, the Buffalo Watershed that's been discussed. May 1st, we had planning director interviews, which we hired this morning. That was done May 1st. May 2nd, we had the Historical Society annual meeting, and fairly good report there. They're coming out ahead on funds. They had a good year. They came out with a profit. they're trying to build up their reserves. Excuse me. I mean, right now, we got a little bit over 1 month's reserve, and as you can, any business that run it, you got 1 month of reserve build up, try and build it up some more, you know, and that's their goal there, to get it built up a little bit more, so, you know. But they're sitting okay for now. Monday, May 6th, the MRC, I don't know, did you have the? Okay, so Monday, May 6th, ITV, with the Minnesota Rural Counties. I guess a lot of stuff has changed now since even that 1 week, you know, now they're coming up and deciding what's going to be happening with this, you know, but as far as the buffer bill, you know, the House version did not have any money in there for it, you know, and from the governor's office, we haven't heard yet whether there's any money in there or not. The Enbridge, the House bill with Enbridge, I'm sure you've been reading about that pipeline going through the northern part of Minnesota. There again, the House bill provides some relief for it, and the Senate bill did not. Broadband, they're still looking at putting 70 million in that. That's 35 million each year. So just a lot of that stuff discussed, but that's all going to depend on what's going to happen in the next week or so. Monday night, I went to the Hawley City Council meeting. There they hired a new police officer, and they're also discussing the SRO officer, which Hawley may combine with their police officer and the Hawley school. So that's going to affect us as far as what we're going to do with our SRO, who's presently at Hawley and Ulen. So it's going to cost us some money because we won't be having that money from Hawley. I mean, if it goes through. So they didn't decide yet how it's going to work out yet, but it's going to affect us somewhat on our budget. After that, I went to the Felton City Council meeting, and we were ready to discuss pretty much what was going on there. Are we on that recycling center that they're going? There I went to Ulen Township. They had some discussion up there on buffer. You know, back in 1979, we, you know, with these buffer strips, it affects each county a little bit. If you're aware of Ulen Township, way up in the northeast corner, there's a water, public waters, going in from Becker County. It goes into Clay County for 1 mile, then goes up to Norman County. And for 1 mile strip in Clay County, it's called public waters, and the other in Becker and in Norman, it's not. So this farmer.
We did talk about the soil and water.
Oh, you did, okay.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit about it. It is confusing to them about how it in 1 mile changes, and when it comes out, you think it would be more classified instead of less, but.
Yeah, but, you know, I saw to a person down in Detroit Lakes, and he said, well, back in 1979, this is the way it was put up. So I asked him, well, who's your boss? Talked to Mr. Gleason down in the public, I talked to him, and he gave me the same answer. Back in 1979, this is the way it was done. And I asked, well, who's your boss? Now I'm up to the top guy, Mr. Hovey, I think, Tom, and I've talked to him now, and he says you have to file a petition to get it changed. So I've been working with Gabe now and trying to get that changed. So that petition has to come before us.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm bringing that up, because when that petition becomes before us, we have to decide, you know, is this public water or isn't it? It just doesn't make sense the way it is. I mean, when each county does their individual thing, it works out okay, but when you put those pieces together, that puzzle together, it doesn't make sense.
It has to.
So a lot of discussion of that. Wednesday, May 8th, I went to the Wild Rice Watershed Board. They're again just normal petitions and stuff like that. They, nothing out of the ordinary happened there. Wednesday evening, I went to Highland Grove. Mostly discussion on roads and stuff. They're trying to get County 115 done, and that's pretty much what happened on that one. Yesterday with Dave Overbo and Steve, who went up to Ada for the Agassiz recreational trail, and pretty much we've been hiring Norman County. We only got 5 miles of that recreation trail, so And Norman County's taking care of those 5 miles for us pretty much, so that's working out real good. After last night, I went to Kidderall City, attended their meeting, and there again, they're getting ready for the they're celebrating 135 years this year, so they're getting ready for that. And they were very concerned. They got water line problems there. I mean, in the wintertime, they have to, some of the houses have to leave their water running because some of the water lines aren't defrosted. If the frost goes down too deep, the water lines freeze up. So that's, they were having some discussion. There's a company, I guess, that has a service line warranty on it, so they may utilize that. From there, I went to Gooseberry Township, and pretty exciting there. Todd chose, I don't know if you know him or not, but they gave him, he retired this year from the Gooseberry Township. He had 40 years of service there, so, nearly 40, because they couldn't find the records how far back he was on, so they put on his certificate nearly 40 years.
They weren't, so far they weren't keeping records. So that's,
I didn't know they let people retire from the town.
No. Yeah.
Well, somehow or other he got off, you know, but it was sort of not comical or whatever, but they just put down nearly 40 years. They weren't quite sure, but and I guess that takes care of my report.
Jim?
Okay, on Wednesday, I attended the Northwest Radio Communications Board via ITV hookup along with Commissioner Whalen and City Council Member Hendrickson from the City of Moorhead. And it was a bit regular bi-weekly or bi-monthly meeting, and we discussed air ambulance scene flights and landing zone protocols. And we got a report that had been solicited in previous meetings from an attorney reporting about recommended options on attendance policy for the NWRECB. And we also heard about new requirements from the state of Minnesota on attendance at meetings. Then on Thursday, I met with Rhonda Porter from the Clay County Social Services in regards to the Commonwealth development that we just spoke about a little while ago. And then I also attended that afternoon the Soil and Water Conservation District for Clay County, along with Commissioner Mojo, which she reported on at 19. That's my report.
Thank you. I had the construction meetings yesterday, and Kevin reported on those. But I do recommend a tour of the detention facility. I think you'd find that interesting and worthwhile to do that. So. And I also had the radio board. Jim reported on that. I had a yellow ribbon committee meeting and basically talking about ways to raise some funds to address some of the programs they're trying to do there. And I had a recorder's compliance meeting last week, and they'll be bringing something forward in the near future. And that was it for me. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you mentioned, I also participated in the Recorder's Office compliance meeting. On the 8th, I met with Sarah Johnson from the Construction Division of the Minnesota Department of Corrections. Just to touch base, she is looking to provide occupations certification July 3rd. And hopefully the inspection division for policies and procedures will be on the 10th. And then we'll move into phase 3 of the juvenile project. That afternoon, I attended a meeting sponsored by the FM Foundation. We've talked about it a little bit in regards to the regional workforce study that they did back in 2015. One of the areas that they had recognized was we were looking at the time we had 6,700 jobs open in the Fargo-Moorhead area. In the next 5 years, they're projecting that we're going to have 30,000. Half of those positions are going to be in that $16 to $20 per hour range, which is going to make it challenging to provide affordable housing. And so they're looking to establish a Cass Clay land trust to help provide some of potential solutions for that. And they're looking for both public and private partnerships in looking for whether it's land, homes, times on the boards or policies. So we may have some additional information for that in the future. Also participated yesterday with, as Commissioner Gross mentioned, in the Legacy Recreational Trails. Next week, I'll be bringing forward, it's hard to believe it, but it's budget time already. I'll be bringing forward for your consideration a proposed budget timeline. And also, hopefully, Darren and I will be coming forward, following up with our strategic planning and looking for some guidance and direction from the board and how you'd like to move forward with some of the issues that we discussed.
Will you be bringing us a update on where we stand budget-wise, percentage-wise?
Yes, yep. We'll also have that from 2000, following 2018 and also this year.
Okay.
That concludes my report.
Thank you. Anything, Tony?
Just a brief update from our office. It's not a report or anything, but I don't know if anyone saw, but the opening, we're still looking for one attorney. It's been changed to half civil, half criminal now. We are very, very busy on the civil end right now. The reason why I wasn't here last week is because I was in a child protection trial. Katie Stock is in a child protection trial today. So that was the reason why it was switched. There's also been some changes of younger workers in the social services department. So it's been an uptick in numbers, new blood, including me, including Ashley in our office. So there's been a lot of moving pieces. There's, again, been an uptick in child protection work, and also just anecdotally talking with other people in social services, there's been an uptick in civil commitments as well. So that's one of the, just something going on our end, is basically just the numbers are up, and just something to be aware of going forward. But hopefully we get a good candidate for that. It would be half criminal prosecution and then half basically child protection work. We've just been busy, and you can tell Rhonda with the fees and everything too, it's been real busy on her end.
Okay, thank you. Pauline, anything else for us?
No.
We're adjourned.